Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking your time and spending it with us today. We're going to get into a pretty thick topic. I'm going to try to keep it to where it doesn't go too far past the 15 minutes that we've tried to allocate for the time of the actual presentation to allow for questions and things like that. This will be available off our website as a recording when it's done at some point. But what we're trying to talk about today is how, with integrations, can we automate legal processes to streamline your business and maximize your revenue stream by getting a workflow to work between systems. About me, there's a bunch of nice things that they asked me to write about myself to give you a bit of information on where I come from. You can read this at your leisure. In general, I've been doing this for decades. I really enjoy it. I love seeing systems automate people's daily tasks and trigger workflows. It's just exciting to see people satisfied with that type of an outcome. But I've been doing it for an awfully long time, as the gray beard may indicate. I'm also joined by Elise, who's my partner in crime on most of these integration projects that we bring in through the shop. She's here if any operations questions come up, and to help me get more details if it comes up like that. We just work together on these, so I think it's always great to have her along. So who's of the audience we have today is currently integrating? There's a poll coming up. We're going to leave it up for just a little while. We got 2 polls on this presentation, not too interactive, just a little. Just curious if anybody is already integrating or not, so I can judge the audience. That's probably everybody. That's good to know. So we have 80% that haven't been integrating already and 20% that have. Good to know. So what we're going to cover in this presentation is the basics and benefits of integration for the legal space, the types of workflows that we do at Alert and in general in the industry, why they're useful, examples of each of these types, the cost and timeline considerations that really help maximize the revenue part and make this get done sooner. Action items for you that if you wanted to get involved with doing this, you want to start putting together some action items for yourself to do. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A that's a little more detailed if you wanted to have a longer discussion about anything specific. I don't mind if you interrupt or add to the conversation as I'm going through, and I will ask for any feedback on these slides, so don't worry about it. But if you have something that you want to talk about specifically, we can do that at the end. We'll have plenty of time. All right. Some of the integration types that we generally see are single direction, inbound or outbound, bidirectional, which gives us our full cycle lead attribution, and complex, where we have custom data mapping and automations. We'll get into the specifics of these coming up. Let's maybe ask you guys if you're using, since there's only 20%, I don't know how much we're going to do, but are there any CRMs or marketing services that you're currently using or are interested in integrating with? We have some of them up here on the poll. If you don't see it on there, go ahead and toss it in the chat. I'm just trying to get an idea of what kinds of things we're looking for in the group. A lot of Salesforce, us too. Lead docket. Cool, I think we got everybody. I'll share that. We'll share that. Good to know. A lot of Salesforce, good product. Definitely love it. Okay, so that said, I'll share the results. The common single directional workflows are in the inbound side, web form and landing page submissions, where leads are created on the internet and they come to our system via API, and then we can make an outbound phone call. Same thing for lead gen tools, marketing or pay-per-click campaigns. They all kind of have the same entry point where they hit our API with the required information for us to be able to call them. Same with compatible chat platforms. This is very common for digital lead campaigns. The outbound side of single direction, the easiest way to get started with this, if you haven't done it before and you've got a compatible CRM, is where we work with our supported ones that we have a full featured or a fully finished, easy to replicate system where it's the contact information and the entirety of your intake in one single field. That'll get you done really quickly. We also can work with almost any web form type of submission where you have a CRM that can enable a web to lead module or a other type of web form. As long as it doesn't have CAPTCHA, we're good. We can interface with that. And of course, other outbound, even single directions may have custom field mapping and other type of lead attribution, case type of data that we have to send. Very common. We do them all the time. With regard to the complex workflows, we can actually work with the inbound leads ID number from, say, Salesforce. If you are one of those people that starts everything and ends it in Salesforce, but sends it through multiple vendors, we can participate in that food chain. You send us the lead ID, we'll either perform a follow-up call or start the whole process. We can then update them or change status in Salesforce using that ID. We can also capture info from other APIs that you might have, say CallRail or a proprietary lead gen tool. So during the process, we can actually go retrieve more data, add that to the lead itself, and continue through the intake process and send that data to you as well. We also accept inbound status changes. If we're working on a campaign where we start the process, get them maybe a retainer sent, or we start the process of calling them, and maybe you take over in the daytime, we only do weekends and nights. If you do reach them and complete the process, you can tell us via API to stop calling them because you got it finished. So we can work with synchronized implementations from both sides. It makes it, those are really fun to do actually. But it allows people who are really CRM gurus of their tool, they can actually be creative with us to figure out the best way to really optimize their relationships with their vendors, their partners, and their own internal teams. We also can work with the client journey to maintain the same look and feel or sound and feel of the transaction for the callers, where we may start from a digital lead or from an inbound phone call. If you wanted us to transfer these people to your office, we can hit your CRM before we do that, so that when you actually receive the call, that you can continue the process and they feel like they've never left your office in the first place, which is really the goal of all of this stuff. Take you back one. Out on the outer fringes, we have the scheduled and automated workflows. If you have a lead that's going to make it through a certain stage of processing with us, and we want to send you either documents or updates or some other information based upon usually the lead ID, or we can create the leads as finished or signed. We can automate that and set that up on a schedule. We can also upload documents to Amazon S3, Google Docs, Dropbox, Box, any of those kinds of things. So the costs and timeline considerations, this is I think really important. I mean, the other stuff, I think it's heady topic, and you can ask any questions you like. I know there's a lot involved here and I'm moving pretty quickly, but suffice to say, whatever your tool has, we have to identify the people who are using them to get all of the stakeholders involved in the requirements gathering to make sure that what you're asking us to interface with is going to work for everybody who's got something to gain from the data that we're sending you. There may be a workflow that needs to be triggered by a specific field that it's possible the person who approves the questionnaire that we're going to ask, the intake questions, may not know about. So we'll get the intake approved and built out, but we're not asking this one question that is required for a workflow to trigger in Salesforce or Filevine or any one of those that has more sophisticated abilities for that. So it's really important to make sure that on your side, it behooves you to get everybody involved that's going to be on the receiving end of our data so that everyone knows what's going to be affected. That also dovetails nicely into understanding the capabilities and dependencies of the tools that you have. If the API is unable to do updating, it's just something we have to take into account in the design. Some of them only allow you to create leads. So we have to change the way our workflow works here to wait until what stages you want for us to post into there. Usually a common one would be, if we talk to them on the phone and they're disqualified, we can tell you, create the lead as disqualified immediately. If they're not a lead, same thing. But if we qualify them and send them a retainer and they don't sign it while we're on the phone with them, we'll send an automated response to push that later, because we have to create a lead. We can't update a lead. We can't say we're chasing it and then come back and update like you could in, say, a Salesforce. And my favorite phrase, known changes go unpunished. Like any good relationship, communication is key. You're going to be thoughtful of one another and communicate the things that we're changing, the things that we want to do. If we make a change to your intake and change a field name, it may cause downstream havoc in your systems because we didn't tell you to change your receiving end to expect that data, and vice versa. Unfortunately, troubleshooting communications between systems is rather difficult, because if we post to an API with the same tested data we did, say, 6 months ago, and you change something about a required field or something like that, it may not tell us during the post. It may not say anything. It may just tell us, great, got your post. But you may find a week later that there's a missing piece of data that caused either a trigger not to work, or now your reporting is off because your attribution doesn't know what that is. So it's super important that if we're going to make changes on either side, that we communicate that and work out a plan so that we don't break the data, because that's the kind of stuff that makes timelines extend and costs increase for just forgetting to put together a team to discuss it. So the action items, if you are interested in working with us or any other vendor, is to define those workflows, the points of contact, determine who your subject matter experts are, and what success looks like, so that we can build to that and test from that, right? So this way we already know on the first call what you're trying to accomplish, who we need to talk to during the build and testing, and everything just works better that way. You also need to obviously obtain the credentials for anything that we need to speak to, identify all systems and applications involved to make sure that we know how to test for all of those to continue functioning as they're expecting, like we talked about before, where if the data is what it's expecting from us, it should flow into the other systems just fine. And if you have the documentation for the endpoint, whether it's proprietary or something public, the sooner you have that with the credentials, the sooner we can do anything, because we can get in there and start seeing, all right, so this is how we're going to build it, and start testing. Any questions at that point? I know that was a lot of stuff to get into. I do think I got it right about the 15-minute mark we were shooting for, but that's a lot of material. Any thoughts? I see we got a case peer in here. We do a lot of work with case peer. Don't be shy. I've had a lot of coffee. I can keep talking.
Are you familiar with HubSpot, the CRM?
HubSpot, yes.
Yeah. Do you think that this is something that's suitable to work with a law firm?
If you've got a workflow that works for you now, then you can. I mean, HubSpot is a chameleon. You can have it built to do different things. If you want it to be a generator of leads, you can send leads to us from it. If you want it to be a case management system, we can put leads in there. There's some specific rules about how that works, but we've done both. And really, all of these CRM choices are really what fits the firm or the marketing firm, what best suits what you're doing. And then you have to look at what the API does to see if that's enough for interactions with people like us. But in general, it's more about how it suits you. I mean, some people use Salesforce, but they'll actually use Litify on top of it because that's a better use case for them, even though it only does single directional input.
I understand.
There's someone who knows what my tie is. This is my Simon Le Bon tie. We just had some Duran Duran in the background there.
Okay, so I think I have a question here for you, if you can hear me.
I can.
Okay, wonderful. So kind of going with single direction and bi-directional, that information translating through. So is there a number, let me see if I can word this question correctly where it makes sense. Is there a number of programs like max so that y'all are capped at communicating to each other? For an example, we get leads through our HubSpot. However, we don't save our information in HubSpot. From there, we move that information over to Salesforce. So if y'all are managing our leads from HubSpot, y'all are going to put that information into whatever system you're using and then send us that information so that we can input that into Salesforce.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay, so
there's no limit.
Okay, and that's all single direction, right? Because none of like I don't need Salesforce to talk to HubSpot. I just need it. I need it to go one direction.
It's very common for us to have multiple points of entry like HubSpot and Google and Facebook. We'll actually tag those with their own attribution and then send them to Salesforce. So it's two single direction integrations,
Okay.
one on the inbound and one on the outbound.
Okay.
No problem at all doing it that way. We will work with you to determine what the best way for your internal tracking is. Really, that's kind of what I was getting at is like, if you have a workflow that's working in whatever tool you have, we'll try to figure out how to keep feeding it the way that it wants that data. So if that's the way it works, go ahead.
Yeah, and this information, like, you know, in one of your slides, you talked about pushing us that information before the transfer call. So I'm assuming that this is happening in real time, like really fast, that we're able to get that information into our Salesforce system before that transfer call.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, we would tell the person to hold. We would actually hit the endpoint and then transfer the call.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I feel like I had one more question for you, and now I think I lost it. So I might come back around.
Feel free.
Okay, I remember now. Do
Awesome.
y'all currently have, you know, Salesforce, or y'all currently have clients that are in Litify?
Yes, several.
Okay. And with those, are there any of them that currently have this integration built in?
Not with
Some sort of
HubSpot
integration
necessarily,
Okay.
but they have their own version of whatever's on the front side.
Okay.
Because some of them
Okay.
actually start everything in Salesforce itself and then send it to us from there, because they have their own marketing lead gen on the side of Salesforce. So the leads come in that status there, and then they send them to us, and then we'll dial out. And then when we're done, we send them back.
Interesting.
We also have seen
Okay.
people do some pretty crazy stuff with Litify where they customize it so that it can do updating as well. Because as you know, Litify out of the box does not.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
But you can make it do it. I should tell everybody here on the call that I forgot to mention, we do have a native Zapier app. So if you're familiar and like using Zapier, we do have that allow you to just drag us in as a step in whatever your workflows are in Zapier. I had a lot of success with that too.
Awesome. What would you say is your typical time frame to get this built out and then like implemented, working in full production?
I mean, that's the hardest part to determine. Like when I was saying before on some of these, like if it's a supported vendor, like a case beer, we can turn around pretty quickly, a couple of days usually. The integration is not the hard part. That's building your questionnaires that ends up taking the time. So if you have, say, 20 different case types that all have their own set of questions, and that's going to be really what takes the longest time. Sending it to case beer is pretty nominal effort to do.
Okay.
So it depends. Like if you have mapped questions and there's some attribution that's different between case types, it really does vary. I wish I could give you a better answer, but I mean, if it's one of our quick start vendors and you have a pretty straight ahead intake, one or two, it's really not too bad, but they can get pretty complicated. Because like if the HubSpot thing works as we hoped it would, and they can send leads to us, then that's really on you. You guys set that part out. We receive the leads and show you this is what they look like. Is this what you got? Great. Then we'll just continue with the secondary. We can actually use Zapier on the way outbound to Salesforce, or go direct if we have to.
The fee associated with this, it's a one-time starter up fee, or is there any other fees associated for maintaining down the road?
We're working on some different plans for that, but right now it's basically a one-time setup fee for the initial build through test. And if there are changes made, we do have to bill you for that. So there's a couple different ways we can work it. Like if it's really basic, we just usually work it in. If it's just like a question change that doesn't affect the integration, then it's just regular maintenance time. You can talk to sales about the specific details, but in general, we try to get it to where you have a setup cost up front, and then we don't want to make it a big contentious project that we have to re-quoting for you, things like that. But we do that if there are large changes.
Okay.
So you're saying now we want to go to Salesforce and to use Google now. that becomes another project. If we're gonna actually
Yeah.
integrate directly with something, build a new workflow, then we have to scope it.
Correct. Okay. And I'm thinking more of like, I need this question to map to this specific field now rather than this field.
Yeah, those aren't usually bad. If it's like a one-to-one, it takes minutes.
Yeah.
Not a big deal.
Okay. Awesome.
So whenever there's substantive changes, we have to discuss it. There's always better if, like I said, if we just keep talking about it, I'm thinking about changing something, we can say, yeah, that's no problem. Just let me know and we'll be ready to do it the same moment you do it. That's the best way. And those usually won't cost you. It's usually only when it's like, oh my God, we didn't tell you and it's been running like this for over a month and this workflow didn't happen. Can you resend all of them for the last month? That gets crazy because then we have to figure out, okay, can we do that? Do we have anything ready to do that process, or do we have to build a script that actually exports the data in that specific format? That's where it gets ugly. Well, if that's all the questions I got, I mean, I can talk about the stuff all day. I mean, I will be when I'm off of the phone, off of this call anyway. So I really appreciate everybody coming. It's been good to talk about this stuff and put it together into some sort of a package. We're usually doing these as a single solution sort of presentation. We'll do our webinars or media calls where we're just talking about a specific implementation with the client. It's kind of nice to see it all as a package of things that we do. And thanks for letting me share that with you.
Yeah, thank you. And would you be sending us a copy of these slides?
Matthew, how are we doing that?
Yes, we will be. So you'll get a follow-up
Perfect.
email in the next
Okay.
couple of days, and that'll have a link to the video itself, so you can rewatch this.
Oh,
And then
wonderful.
you'll
Okay.
also have a link to download this as a PDF.
Okay. I'll look for that. Thank you, Matthew.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.